Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Yesterday, I took my son fishing. He wanted to go to a nearby lake that we haven't been to in quite some time, and it's not known to be a great area. For some background, the last time we went, about a year ago, a car drove by and screamed, "Nice ass!" at me while I stood there with my young son. This kind of garbage behavior is unfortunately expected in that area. It's also known to be a late-night hookup spot as well as a late-night drug deal location. And due to the lake's reputation, I had made a deal with my dad that I wouldn't stay there past 4 p.m. without him. Now, on to the story. My 12-year-old son, who looks much younger than he is, we both pulled up at our favorite fishing spot, a small pond on the opposite side of the road as the lake, and almost immediately, an older gentleman approached us, asking if there were fish in the pond. I replied that we had just gotten started, so nothing yet, but that we had caught fish in the pond on plenty of other occasions. He thanked us for the information and returned to his spot on the other side of the road. About 15 minutes later, another younger man approaches the older man with a dog. I can see and hear them chatting, but they've made no move to involve us in the conversation, which I'm actually glad for. I just want to enjoy a day with my son. Well, unfortunately, the water in the pond was incredibly low and murky, and I could tell that we weren't going to have any luck. So I tell my son to pack it up and we'll try another spot on the other side of the lake. As we begin packing our gear into the trunk, the younger man yells over, "Sorry if my dog and I ran you off." I tell him it's no problem and that we were simply moving to a better fishing spot. He then starts telling me how nice it is to see a mom taking her kid fishing and how you don't see that very often and etc. I get this a lot, so I'm pretty used to it. We have a short conversation about it as I pack up, and I then move towards the driver's side doors to depart. But before I can leave, the younger man starts up another conversation, this time asking me how old I think he is. This feels strange to me, but I'm nice to a fault sometimes, so I answer his question. I tell him that I'm a horrible judge of age, but maybe 25? He tells me that he is 38, and that I'm too kind, and I laugh it off by saying something like, "I work with teenagers, so they always guess me well above my age just to be mean." He asks where I work, and I stupidly tell him my city. Turns out he lives there too, and starts going on and on about how he got a free apartment on such and such street because his baby mama kicked him out of their house. I think he's talking about some kind of government assistance program. It's a weird flex, but okay, man. At this point, I'm standing by the car door with my hand on the handle, and my son is already in the back seat. This guy can't take the hint and starts telling me all about his awful baby mama and how women are supposed to be submissive, quiet, and do what they're told to. He specifically said, "I mean, it's cool that you can bait and hook or whatever, but you're still a woman." Now, my alarm bells are blaring. This guy struck up a conversation by commending me for doing a typically dad thing with my kid, but now he's putting me down for the same thing. He's gone from being overly friendly and complimentary to agitated and ranting. I should have been rude and just got in my car and left, but I've unfortunately been conditioned, like many women, to be polite even when we're uncomfortable. Instead, I start making comments in the hopes that he'll see that I'm not some meek, submissive woman who's going to agree with him. After all, I'm a tatted up chick with an eyebrow piercing and 2 lip piercings. I don't exactly look like a submissive little housewife. I guess I was trying to make him just as uncomfortable as he made me, in the hopes that he would leave me alone. After he says women shouldn't be loud or opinionated, I tell him, "Oh, well, you wouldn't like me at all." He tries to backpedal, saying, "I mean, it's okay to be loud, I guess, but don't try that with your man, you know." I say, "My man doesn't tell me shit. I do what I want." This kind of goes back and forth, and it just goes on for a while, before he finally shakes his head and says, "I just don't understand what kind of woman would act like that." And I just reply, "A strong one." And as soon as the words left my mouth, the older gentleman yells from his spot on the bank, "Yeah, say that again, honey." This distracted the creep long enough for me to hop in the car and then lock the doors. I still don't feel safe though. Unbeknownst to Creepazoid, only 2 of my car doors actually have functioning locks, but at least they're the 2 on his side. I put the key in the ignition, no dice, nothing. Of all the times for my car to act up, it chooses now. Panic has now set in as I repeatedly try to start my car. I can see him out the corner of my eye and he's taken notice of my car troubles and is trying to get my attention. As he takes a few steps towards my car, the engine finally roars to life and I peel out of there. Only then do I let my composure crumble and have a long talk with my son about what just happened. To the older gentleman who took notice of my discomfort and provided a distraction, "I'd gladly meet with you again any day." But to the younger misogynistic creep, "I don't know if I was actually in any danger from you, but my gut said that I was. Let's never meet again. Oh, and to my dad, I'll make you a new deal. I am never going to that lake alone again, regardless of the time of day." I'm a male, and years back when I was 20, I was walking back to my car from the library in the city. I was on a side street, and it was about 10 p.m. I had my backpack on and it was full, and it had my laptop in it. So, I am on a pretty dark street, and there are lights, but they are very far apart, so it gets very dark in between them. I come across this man walking his big pit bull, and he came off as really nice at first. He smiled and he wanted to chat. So I stopped, and we are talking normal, and I was asking about his dog. But after 30 seconds or so, he sort of steers us into a dark spot under a tree without the streetlight, and I thought that it was strange, but okay, because maybe it was for his dog. But then he moves. So he and his dog are both in front of me, and I am cornered into the house behind me. And I start getting this bad feeling. This whole time, he is being friendly and smiling, but at certain points, he would get serious, almost like he was thinking of his next move. And he was moving closer, all the while fidgeting with his other hand in his pocket. Now, he is very close to me at this point, and I had nowhere to go because my back is against the angled window, so I'm literally in the corner blocked on all sides by him and his dog, and this house behind me. My internal siren is blaring at this point. I'm a very nervous person, but I am shaking at this point and I feel that I am cornered and it's pitch black under the shade. I decided to spring out from being cornered against the house and then into the street. He looked surprised, almost like, "Where'd you go?" And he begins walking towards me, and as I get to the middle of the street, I took my backpack off of one shoulder and I grabbed my apple carving knife, and he stopped walking towards me. I get to a more busy area with people and I hop in a cab, and the cab driver notices that I am shaking. I told him that I was just about to get robbed, and I asked him to tell the police. And once I got to my car, I drove near where I was, and I saw 3 cop SUVs with their sirens on going towards that area. Later on, I heard that there were a bunch of robberies that happened in this part of the city. This happened around the summer of 2000 in Midwest USA, and I was a 12-year-old boy. I was shy and I never did well with confrontation. Anytime I was scared, I'd feel myself shaking. One day, my dad and cousin were weightlifting in the garage and it was open. I then decided to grab my bicycle out of the garage and then ride up and down the street while my dad and cousin lifted. As I am pedaling away from my house, I see another kid riding his bike, probably 5 to 6 houses down from mine, but he's just kinda going in circles. I maybe get like 20 feet near him, but that's it. No words were exchanged, not even a wave or a nod, and I just kept my head down and I kept pedaling. On my next circle back down the street, that's when things got weird. I got near the area where the kid had been riding and he's not around anymore, so I guess that he went inside wherever he lived. And right as I'm about to turn around and head towards my house, which is like probably 80 to 100 yards away, I hear a man yell, "Hey!" in an unsettling tone. I look up and a man is standing in his front doorway, probably 25 feet from me, as I'm paused on the street with my bike. He's one of the creepiest looking dudes that I have ever seen in my life. He has on a ball cap, and he's wearing this thick Jeffrey Dahmer looking glasses, tan burnt orange, dirty looking wrinkled skin, and he had to be around in his 40s probably. He looked straight out of a horror movie, and he just had this sinister angry look on his face. He then says, "If you say anything to my son again, I'm going to run your ass over." At this point, I was crying and frozen with fear, but then I start biking home faster than ever. I'd never been in a situation like this in my life. I couldn't believe what happened because I never said anything to that boy. So I get to the open garage where my dad and cousin are still lifting. I tell them the story, and they decide to go to this guy's house and address the situation that just occurred. My dad and cousin had a few beers and are pretty jacked, so they were ready to tussle if needed. My dad goes straight to this guy's door with my cousin behind him and then knocks loudly. The man opens the door and has this huge Rottweiler by his side, barking and going crazy at my dad and cousin. He threatens to let the dog loose, but my dad and cousin aren't cowering down one bit. After a bit of bickering for a minute, the guy goes inside his house and then shuts the door. Nothing else happens that night, and we walk back home. A few days pass and now I'm about to get to the creepiest part. During the summer when my parents worked during the day, my grandma would come over and babysit my little brother and I. We were about 10 minutes from downtown and my grandma was going to take us there to grab food at Sonic. We get in her car and start driving down the road towards that creepy dude's house. This made me feel very uneasy, but that's the direction we had to go. And as we get closer to the house, the hair on my neck starts to stand up again. As we go by the house, I see him. He's sitting in a red truck in his driveway, facing the road like he's about to pull out. I don't remember well, but I think he might have had a grin on his face as we drove by. We pass the house and he pulls out behind us. I start freaking out a bit, so I tell my grandma the story about the man driving behind us. At first, my grandma was chill about it, but then I noticed that she seemed a bit shaken. This is because she had made about 67 turns to throw him off our trail, but he still kept following us. Every little turn. And at this point, me and my brother are in the back seat with our heads down as he follows us. But luckily, we made it to downtown where it was busy. We get near the police station, I believe, and take another turn. Then finally, he just passes on by. I never saw that man again. My mom and dad split up and we left that neighborhood 2 years later with my mom to move to the country. My dad still lives at the same house, and I wonder if that dude stuck around for a while or even still lives at that house. What was his intent? Was it a coincidence or did he really plan on following us? It was so weird how it looked like he was just waiting in his driveway for us to pass by. I have hesitated to share this story for a long time because I know how important the mutual trust between a resident and their landlord or maintenance staff is, and I don't want to instill any unnecessary distrust in anyone's landlord. I've shared stories before about dangerous and scary residents that I encountered while working at apartment complexes. But this is a story about my time on the other side of things as a renter. Before I had even graduated from high school, I knew that I wanted to live at Paradise Apartments. I was a bit naive at that time, drawn in by the many amenities that I would never use. But I primarily wanted to live there because the complex was pet-friendly and within my small budget. When the time eventually came for me to get my own place, I sublet the only apartment that they had available and then I moved in. Unfortunately, I came to realize that the apartment wasn't as nice as I'd originally thought. The building was old but remodeled, so it had all the typical plumbing issues and thin walls. I also learned that it was not the safest part of town. I was primarily an online student, but I had one class that met in person twice a week at around 8 a.m. I'm a bit of a homebody, so I rarely left during the day except for that class, the occasional shopping excursion, or to spend time with my boyfriend in the evening after he got off of work. My apartment was a bit of a Bermuda Triangle, even though it was only 600 square feet, and I live alone. Things had a way of growing legs and walking away. I had 2 kittens at that time, and I blamed them regularly for things disappearing. Something odd that kept reoccurring, however, was that I would find my underwear box out and sitting in the center of my bedroom floor on days when I had a class. I didn't have a proper dresser. Instead, I'm using an IKEA shelf with some IKEA boxes for designated clothes, maybe socks, underwear, pants, and pajamas. But I always could have sworn that I'd put the underwear box away after getting ready for class. But I chalked it up to me forgetting as a result of having to get up early and being focused on getting to class on time. Arguably paranoid, I started to think that some of my laundry was disappearing as well, as my favorite articles of clothing would go into the laundry hamper and seemingly never come back with the clean clothes. Towards the end of that semester, I was working one evening on a homework assignment when my boyfriend called to let me know that his roommate had accidentally locked him out of the apartment. I had a key to their place, so he asked if I could run over real quick to let him in. And before I left, I had made a mental note that I had left literally every light in my apartment on. Because I was living on a pretty tight budget, I normally made a point of turning off all the lights when I left. But my boyfriend only lived about 5 minutes away, so I knew that I'd be there and back very quickly. Sure enough, I got back less than 15 minutes later. But I immediately sensed something was off, as I could see that the lights were off through the blinds. I called my boyfriend and he drove over to meet me. We unlocked the door and then we went in. All the lights were off in my apartment. Thinking maybe I'd have a power outage, I flipped on the main light and it came on. My boyfriend checked the entire apartment and no one was inside. But someone had gone through and systematically turned off every light at their switch, including my lizard's basking light, the only light that I always left on because it was on a timer. And my laptop, which I left open on my assignment, but now the computer had been powered down and closed. We called the emergency maintenance number and I explained that someone had been inside my apartment and that they have used the key because there was no sign of forced entry. My manager called me back and told me that I had to be imagining things. Maybe I had forgotten that I had turned off all the lights before I left, and I assured him that I wouldn't have turned off the computer or the lizard light. Someone had been in my apartment. I told him that I was extremely worried because obviously this person had a key to get in. Either they worked for the complex or maybe it was a previous tenant or guest. I asked if they had changed the locks after the previous tenant moved out, and they assured me that they changed the locks after they moved out. The manager suggested that maybe it was a friend pranking me, someone else that I probably had given a key. But the only other people that I had given keys were my boyfriend and my mom, and she lives 3 hours away. In any case, neither of them would have pranked me in this way. The manager finally agreed to send someone out immediately to change the lock for my peace of mind. I brought up my concern that it was someone on the staff since they would be the only other people with keys. The manager claimed that the keys were locked in a special safe that required a personalized code in an office with a security camera. They changed my locks, but I had my doubts that it would do much good. As far as I was aware, there were only 2 maintenance men that worked at that complex. One nice older man that didn't seem all that skilled, and a younger guy with a scruffy beard that gave me a bad feeling, and I suspected that he had to be the one that had come in. When I had first moved, the manager had told me that I would be getting a new kitchen counter within the first 3 days. I waited to move in my kitchen stuff, but after a week they hadn't come, and then after a few months, that I had completely forgotten about it. One day I was sitting in my living room, and this scruffy maintenance guy walked in without knocking or announcing himself, and I hadn't received a notice to expect him. He said he was there to replace my countertop, and it took him 2 days to install one small piece of counter. A few weeks later, I was getting out of the shower, and I heard a single knock at the door. I called out, "Just 1 minute!" And I hurried to get some clothes. But not 2 seconds later, the door started to open and I had to slam it shut, just to stop him from coming in. He claimed that he hadn't heard me called out, but I had my doubts. And I don't remember what made-up excuse he had for coming in. Another time, I found a note from him that he had come in, again, and it didn't even give a reason as to why, but that he made sure not to let my cats out. He also made a note about my 3rd cat being cute. Except, I didn't have a 3rd cat. I did, however, have a picture of my childhood cat in my bedroom on the IKEA shelf where I keep my clothes. At that point, I went to the office to ask them to make a note in my file that I wanted at least 24 hours notice before entry going forward. And also, I wanted to always be present for future entry. Now that I knew without a shadow of a doubt that someone was coming in secretly, it all made sense. It hadn't been long after the surprise maintenance visit stopped that things had started moving around in my apartment. He was also on site all of the time, so he would know when I came and I went. Who knew how many times he had snuck in, how many small souvenirs he had stolen? He could have been coming in while I was asleep. After the night with the lights, I put my own lock on the door, but still didn't totally trust the apartment. I ended up buying a condo shortly after, with the help of my parents. I subleased the apartment and then I moved. In the final days before I left, my mom came into town to help me move my stuff, and while she was home alone and I was at class, she caught the scruffy maintenance man trying to get his key to work in my lock. She demanded to know what he was doing, and he said that he was here to paint the front door. I hadn't received a notice, and he didn't have any paint or supplies, and she told him that he could wait until after I moved out. A few years later, I was shocked by the owner of the apartments while working at another complex in town, OK Apartments. Shopping is when an employee from one apartment complex takes a tour at another apartment complex under the guise of wanting an apartment for the purpose of gaining information that they might not otherwise easily give up. It can also be performed by your own management company to make sure that you are doing a good job. There were certain tells a shopper always gave, like asking specifically worded questions. Is it safe here? I'm a felon, can I live here? And etc. Those kinds of examples. And that required specifically worded answers and were easy to trip up on, being too wealthy for the complex. Rolex watch, sports car, nice suit, and etc. And being too flexible on what they were interested. And for example, they were interested in all the layouts and were open to move in whenever. This guy seemed too old and too well off to be randomly considering an apartment at OK. We were geared toward lower income folks. And while I was giving the tour, he asked if I had any opinions on other apartment complexes in town and mentioned Paradise specifically. And normally, I wouldn't badmouth any other complexes. I preferred to win them over by showing them the positives of our community. But I told him that I probably wasn't the best person to ask that question because I was probably the only person to give Paradise a bad review in the last 5 years. He asked me to elaborate, and I told him my apartment had been broken into and I suspected that it was someone on their maintenance staff. At that point, he revealed that he was the owner of Paradise and that he was very disturbed to hear that I had this experience. He asked me to describe the maintenance man in detail. I assured him that it was in the past and that I was over it, but he insisted on calling the manager over at Paradise. It was still the same guy, and he asked him over speakerphone if they had had any issues with the maintenance staff back in the year that I have lived there. He answered yes, that there had been a scruffy young maintenance man that he had to fire because he had been caught multiple times breaking into the apartments of single women. Satisfied, the owner proudly told me that the issue had been resolved and asked if I would be willing to change my review. I told him no. None of this had changed the fact that I had experienced this and actually validated what I had suspected. In the years that I worked as a leasing agent, I learned a lot about where complexes will cut corners to save time and money. From my experience, a lot did not switch out the locks if the tenant was good, and a lot did not require background checks for employees, even though they did require them from tenants. Keys also got passed out willy-nilly to vendors and maintenance during turns, and the employees frequently got master keys that would open all of the doors. I won't go so far as to say every complex operated this way, but every complex that I worked at was doing this when I started there. Because of my own experiences, once I began managing a complex, I enforced strict rules about changing locks, tracking keys, posting proper notices, and requiring background checks for all employees and also tenants. At least here in Florida, with MIA's law going into effect this year, background checks for employees and security measures for keys are required for all the complexes. Even still, if you're renting an apartment, stay diligent. If you have a reason to believe that someone is coming into your house, document it and let the staff, police, family, and friends know about it. You never know who might have a key to your apartment. This occurred in 2017 in NSW, Australia. When I was younger, I had a sleepover with 7 of my friends, 2 of which arrived later on in the night. It was around 9:30 at night when we were all surrounding the campfire that my friend's stepdad had built the day earlier for the party. My friend and I both got up to walk to a small tin shed in the backyard that was full of mattresses and used primarily for storage. And as we were walking towards the said shed, I stopped mid-walk because I thought I saw someone standing right in between the 2 fences opposite of his house. I got really scared about this, and I went straight back to the campfire without telling an adult for some strange reason. But when I woke up the next day, we all went out to check if the coals were still hot because his dogs liked to jump in the fire pit. When everyone went to check the coals, I went towards the fence where I thought I saw this person, and to my surprise, actually found 2 size 12 shoe impressions in the ground, which flattened the extremely long grass. 2 months later, my friend group was wandering the streets in my small rural suburb at night. On the main road that went through the estate, there was a really sketchy park with an old block of toilets and a set of swings. When someone suggested that we walk over to the park to hang out on the way to someone's house, I pointed out that there was what appeared to be a dude with a kid on the swings. When someone suggested that we walk over to the park to hang out on the way to someone's house, I pointed out that there was what appeared to be a dude with a kid on the swings. But as we switched the side of the road we were walking on, I realized that there was only one person, a guy dressed in black pushing an empty swing. I also spotted that the guy's head and the right hand was twitching constantly and very aggressively. And after some convincing, we all got pretty freaked out by it and then decided to walk, well, I mean run, to my friend's house. 5 months after that, I woke up in my room to go to the toilet in the ensuite, which also had a bathroom, a large sink, and a shower. And as I sat down on the toilet, I could hear something tapping on the toilet window. It was like a tree branch, and for some strange reason, the light turned off. I hid behind the beam in the ensuite and slowly peeked out the window, to which I could see someone directly standing in between the corridor outside in the fernery. Coming out of the toilet, instead of walking down to the hallway and telling my parents, I turned right to the laundry door, which led to the washing machine, the dryer, and another door opposite that. And in a spat of courage, I flung the door wide open and I screamed, "Boo!" really loudly. But to my surprise, I couldn't see anyone. I actually couldn't see anyone, and as I said boo, I realized that I could feel my breath almost coming back, like there was a wall in front of me. And looking up, I realized that there was a person standing right in front of the fly screen, blocking out my view, which was limited to above the person's shoulders and under his hands. I assumed that it was a guy because their body shape is eerily similar to mine, with broad shoulders and roughly 6'7" to 6'8" tall. Because I am 6'8", and I have to suck in most of the door frames. The next morning, I went out with my mom to the garage to find the sand on the ground with this hiking boot-like impressions leading toward the two gates, which were flung wide open and one even off the hinges. I passed all of this off with simple explanations as a kid. The guy in the fence was a neighbor who was curious about the party. The person at the park was just a weirdo who was trying to scare kids during that killer clown phase. And the last one, I honestly have no idea, as do none of my friends or family members that I have told this to. But what is very creepy to me is that all of these 3 individuals I saw all had the exact same body shape and posture. You know, kinda slumped over because of their height and sitting position. Which leads me to believe that these were all the same person. And later confirmed with my friends that they all saw the one dude by himself on multiple occasions acting really weird around dusk on school days, near the bus stops. And here are the top comments from my last video. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.